The hegemony ships descended like silver sifts through Earth's atmosphere, their hulls unmarked by the desperate fire of humanity's orbital defense platforms. Admiral Kira Valdez watched from the bridge of the Defiant's wake as her fleet's last volleys sparked harmlessly against alien shields that rippled like water disturbed by pebbles. "Ma'am, they're broadcasting on all frequencies," reported Lieutenant Commander Yarick Osman, his voice tight with controlled fear. Universal translators working, but the message, he swallowed hard. "They're not demanding surrender." Valdez stepped closer to the communications console, her weathered hands gripping the edge until her knuckles went white. Through the static came a voice that seemed to emanate from multiple throats at once, melodic yet utterly alien. "People of Earth," the hegemony speaker announced, "we are the Veltharian Collective. We have observed your species for 3 of your generations. You show promise, but you are scattered, unfocused. Your children will be taken to our worlds, where they will be properly educated and prepared for service to the greater good of the galaxy." The transmission cut out, leaving only the sound of Valdez's harsh breathing and the distant rumble of alien engines. She had seen the preliminary reports: massive ships, positioned over every major population center, their weapons trained, not on military installations, but on schools, hospitals, residential districts. "How many?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. 15 million, maybe more, Osman replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every human under the age of 16. They're using some kind of selective teleportation technology. The children just vanish." Valdez closed her eyes, thinking of her own daughter, Lyra, somewhere in the suburbs of New Geneva, 8 years old, with her father's stubborn chin and her mother's fierce curiosity. When she opened her eyes again, they burned with something that made her bridge crew step back involuntarily. "Signal all remaining ships," she ordered. "Full retreat to the Titan shipyards. Authorization Omega-7." The authorization code sent. A chill through the bridge. Every officer knew what it meant: the activation of humanity's most closely guarded secret. The project that had consumed 1/3 of Earth's military budget. For the past decade, the Rathburn Protocol died as the Defiant's wake and her sister ships burned hard for the outer system. Valdez pulled up the classified files on her personal terminal. The hegemony had made their first and fatal mistake. They had assumed humans were like the other species they had encountered, creatures who would negotiate, who would accept the loss of their young as an unfortunate but necessary sacrifice for the greater good. They didn't understand that humans were the species that had invented the concept of total war. They didn't know that every human military doctrine since the 20th century had been built around a simple principle: there are some things worth dying for, and anything worth dying for is worth killing for. The Veltharian had taken Earth's children, thinking they were claiming the future of humanity. Instead, they had just signed their own death warrant. 3 weeks later, as the last of the hegemony's collection ships departed Earth's system, with their cargo of 15 million human children, the message went out across every human colony, every military installation, every research station scattered among the stars. "This is Admiral Kira Valdez, acting commander of the Terran Defense Force. The hegemony has committed an act of war against humanity. They have taken our children. Under the Rathburn Protocol, all human assets are hereby placed under unified military command. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier, everything we have built, everything we are is now dedicated to one purpose: bringing our children home." The message concluded with coordinates for the Titan shipyards and a single additional line that would echo through human space for generations. "They wanted to teach our children about war. Let's give them a lesson they'll never forget." The first human retaliation came not from the Rathburn fleet still assembling at Titan, but from a single civilian transport ship called the Wandering Star. Captain Dex Kowalski had been hauling rare earth minerals between the outer colonies. When the news reached him, his 6-year-old son had been among those taken from Earth. Kowalski's ship was ancient, held together by determination and prayer, mounting nothing more dangerous than a mining laser. But 3 days after the hegemony's departure from Earth, he found himself staring at a Veltharian patrol craft near the Centauri way station. Wandering Star. "This is hegemony vessel classification tertiary 779, came the now familiar, multi-tone voice. "You will adjust course to comply with new shipping regulations. All human vessels must submit to inspection." Kowalski's response was to push his aging reactor to the red line and ram the mining laser to full power. The Veltharian ship, sleek and obviously superior in every way, moved to intercept with the casual arrogance of a predator approaching prey. They had not expected the human to accelerate directly toward them. The wandering star struck the hegemony vessel amidships at a relative velocity of 8,000 kilometers per hour. The civilian transport disintegrated instantly, its reactor core breaching in a brief new star that took the alien ship with it. The explosion scattered debris across 3 light minutes of space. But buried in the wreckage was something that would change the course of the war. Scavenger crews found Captain Kowalski's final message, recorded on an emergency beacon. Tell them we're not sheep. Tell them we're wolves, and they just scattered our pack. More importantly, they found intact sections of Veltharan technology, the alien selective teleportation system, their shield generators, their neural interface networks, all of it fell into human hands within hours of the first exchange. At the Titan shipyards, Admiral Valdres studied the recovered technology with Dr. Amara Okafor, humanity's leading expert in xenobiology. The facilities around them hummed with activity. As the Rathburn ships took shape, massive vessels built around a single principle, overwhelming firepower concentrated in the smallest possible package. Their teleportation technology is remarkably sophisticated, Dr. Okafor explained, her fingers dancing across holographic displays. But it has a fatal flaw. It requires precise biometric locks to function. They can only teleport what they've already scanned and cataloged. Valdres leaned forward, meaning they can't teleport our children off their ships unless they've updated their scanning protocols. The technology is too precise, too dependent on biological markers. Change those markers even slightly and the system fails. How do we change biological markers? Dr. Okafor smiled grimly. We've been working on bioaugmentation protocols for years. Combat enhancement, radiation resistance, enhanced healing. Nothing that would harm the children, but enough to make them unrecognizable. 2 Veltharan sensors. The implications hit Valdres like a physical blow. You're talking about turning our children into weapons. No, Dr. Okafor corrected. I'm talking about making them immune to the hegemony's primary advantage. The moment we can neutralize their teleportation technology, this becomes a conventional war, and in conventional war, humans don't lose. Valdres finished. The first Rathburn ship, the Eternal Fury, launched 6 days later. It was followed by the Blood Covenant, the Savage Grace, and dozens of others. Each vessel carried enough firepower to sterilize a continent, and each was crewed by volunteers who had lost children to the hegemony. The message they carried was simple, broadcast on every frequency the Veltharan used: return our children unharmed, and we will show mercy. Continue to hold them prisoner, and we will show you why humanity conquered every predator on our world. The hegemony's response came in the form of 3 battle groups, moving to intercept the human fleet. The first engagement would take place in the debris field of the former Proxima colony, where the aliens had established a forward base. As the human ships approached, their crews could see the Veltharan vessels elegant, graceful, with shield systems that shimmered like aurora. They were beautiful, advanced, and utterly unprepared for what humans considered acceptable losses in pursuit of their objectives. The Eternal Fury fired first, its main guns carving through the vacuum toward the lead alien vessel. The battle for humanity's children had begun. The first engagement at Proxima Colony lasted 14 hours and ended with the complete annihilation of both fleets. Admiral Valdres watched the aftermath from the bridge of the Rathburn Sovereign, her flagship's hull still cooling from the battle's heat around her. The void glittered with the expanding debris of 6 to 7 human ships and 43 Veltharan vessels. Status report, she ordered, her voice hoarse from breathing smoke and recycled air. We've lost 60% of our fleet, reported Commander Yuki Tanaka, her executive officer. But the aliens fared worse. Their shields couldn't adapt to our kinetic bombardment strategy. They're not used to enemies who are willing to sacrifice entire ships for a single successful ramming attack. Valdres nodded grimly. The human strategy had been born from desperation and refined through sacrifice. Instead of trying to match Veltharan technology's ship for ship, they had embraced the mathematics of overwhelming force. 3 human vessels for every alien ship, with crews who considered death in battle an acceptable price for their children's freedom. Any word from the other theaters? Mixed results, Tanaka replied. The Wolfpack squadrons have been hitting their supply lines, but they're adapting. Their new patrol patterns are more aggressive, and they've started targeting civilian ships on sight. The war had spread beyond Earth's system within weeks. The Veltharian Collective controlled 17 star systems, each one a fortress world, where human children were being held in massive education facilities. The hegemony claimed they were preparing the children for a greater purpose. But intercepted communications suggested something far more sinister. Dr. HFY's voice crackled. Through the comm system, Admiral, we've completed analysis of the Proxima facility. You need to see this. The holographic display materialized in the center of the bridge, showing the interior of the alien installation they had just destroyed. Valdris felt her blood turn to ice as she saw row upon row of crystalline pods, each one containing a human child suspended in some kind of neural interface fluid. They're not educating them, Dr. HFY explained. They're downloading their memories, their experiences, their emotions. The children are being used as some kind of psychological database. The hegemony is studying human behavior patterns by directly accessing their minds. Commander Tanaka stepped forward. Why? What could they possibly learn from children? Everything. Valdris whispered, understanding hitting her like a physical blow. They're trying to understand what makes us human, our capacity for sacrifice, for rage, for protection of our young. They're studying us to find our weaknesses. The implications were staggering. The hegemony hadn't taken Earth's children as hostages or even as future soldiers. They had taken them as test subjects, as living specimens to be dissected and analyzed until the Veltharian understood exactly how to defeat humanity. There's more, Dr. HFY continued. The neural interface technology is damaging. The children can survive the process, but prolonged exposure causes permanent psychological trauma, memory loss, emotional dysfunction, complete personality dissolution. Valdris closed her eyes, thinking of her daughter Lyra. How long did they have before? The bright, curious child she remembered became a hollow shell in an alien laboratory? How long, she asked, based on the decay patterns we're seeing? Maybe 6 months before the damage becomes irreversible. 6 months. The human fleets were already stretched to their limits, and they had barely made a dent in the hegemony's defenses. Conventional tactics weren't working fast enough. Signal all fleet commanders, Valdris ordered. We're implementing the Scorched Earth Protocol. The Scorched Earth Protocol had been designed as humanity's last resort, a strategy so brutal and indiscriminate that it violated every principle of civilized warfare. Instead of trying to capture Veltharian facilities intact, human forces would focus on complete destruction of enemy infrastructure, regardless of civilian casualties or strategic value. Mum, Tanaka said quietly, the protocol includes bombing planets, civilian populations. The hegemony made their choice when they took our children. Valdris replied, every day we delay, more of our kids lose themselves to their machines. We're not fighting for territory or resources anymore. We're fighting for time. The first Scorched Earth operation began 3 days later. Captain Ravi Patel led a squadron of 12 ships against the Veltharian mining world of Kethmora. Instead of attempting to capture the facilities, they simply obliterated them from orbit, reducing cities to ash and converting the planet's surface to molten glass. The hegemony's response was swift and decisive. They began executing human children in retaliation, broadcasting the murders across every frequency humans used. The first victim was a 7-year-old girl named Elena Vasquez from Mexico City. Her death was transmitted live to every human ship. In the fleet, the psychological warfare cut both ways. The Veltharian expected humans to recoil from the brutality, to negotiate, to seek some kind of peaceful resolution. Instead, the executions only deepened human resolve. Captain Patel's response to Elena's murder was to detonate a nuclear warhead in the atmosphere of the hegemony's primary shipyard, creating an electromagnetic pulse that disabled their entire fleet. Construction program. The war had escalated beyond any possibility of negotiation. The hegemony had expected to fight a civilized species that would accept reasonable losses in exchange for the greater good. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that would burn down the galaxy before allowing their children to be harmed. The Veltharian began to realize they had made a fundamental error in their assessment of human nature. They had captured Earth's children thinking they were claiming the future of the species. Instead, they had just guaranteed that humanity would never stop fighting until every last alien was dead. The turning point came when Commander Alexei Volkov's deep reconnaissance ship, the Shadow of Wrath, penetrated the hegemony's core system of Velthara Prime. What he found there changed everything. Admiral, Volkov's transmission crackled with static from the encrypted relay. You need to see this intelligence package. The children, they're not just being studied. They're being prepared for something called the Integration Protocol. Valdris accessed the data package from her flagship's secure terminal, her blood running cold as she absorbed the intercepted hegemony communications. The Veltharian weren't just studying human psychology. They were attempting to transfer human consciousness patterns into their own species. Dr. Okafor's voice was grim as she explained the implications. They're trying to create hybrid beings, Veltharian bodies with human minds, human emotions, human instincts. They want to become us, Admiral. They want to steal our children's souls and wear them like masks. The revelation reframed the entire war. This wasn't just kidnapping or even genocide. It was something far more monstrous. The hegemony was attempting to commit identity theft on a species-wide scale, to hollow out humanity's children and puppet their minds from within alien bodies. How long do we have? Valdris asked. The first integration attempts are scheduled for next week. If they succeed, we won't just lose our children, we'll lose the very essence of what makes them human. Valdris made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She activated the Omega contingency, a plan so desperate and horrific that it had been classified beyond even the Rathburn Protocol. It involved the complete militarization of human space, the conversion of every civilian vessel into a weapon of war, and the systematic destruction of every Veltharian world. Regardless of whether it held human children, the new strategy was simple: make the cost of holding humanity's children greater than the hegemony's ability to bear. If they wanted to study human psychology, humanity would give them a lesson in what happened when humans stopped caring about their own survival. The first Omega strike was led by Captain Naya Okafor, Dr. Okafor's daughter and commander of the converted colony ship Burning Vengeance. Her target was the Veltharian agricultural world of Symmetria, where millions of alien civilians lived in floating cities above vast hydroponic farms. The Burning Vengeance had been a peaceful transport vessel just months before, carrying settlers to the frontier colonies. Now it mounted fusion warheads in its cargo holds and was crewed by volunteers who had lost children to the hegemony. Captain Okafor's own son, Marcus, was being held on Velthara Prime. This is Captain Okafor to all ships, she broadcast as her fleet approached Symmetria. We are not here to conquer. We are not here to negotiate. We are here to demonstrate the price of taking our children. The Veltharian defense fleet rose to meet the Meligate ships with crews who had never faced an enemy willing to die for their objectives. The human strategy was brutally simple: ram every alien vessel they could reach, then drop nuclear weapons on the cities below. The Battle of Symmetria lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the planet's surface was uninhabitable and 3 million Veltharian civilians were dead. The human fleet had been reduced to a single damaged ship. But the message was clear: humanity would commit genocide rather than allow their children to be transformed into alien puppets. The hegemony's response was swift and predictable. They began accelerating the Integration Protocol, rushing to complete the first transformations before humanity could strike again. The first victim was a 12-year-old boy named David Kim. From Seoul, his consciousness forcibly merged with a Veltharian warrior caste body. The hybrid creature that resulted was broadcast across human space as a warning. It had David's memories, his voice, his mannerisms, but it spoke with the hegemony's multi-tone accent, and his eyes held no recognition of its human origins. It was David Kim, but it was also completely, irrevocably alien. The sight of the hybrid drove humanity to new depths of fury. The Rathburn fleets abandoned all pretense of mercy, targeting Veltharian worlds with weapons designed to crack continents. The hegemony responded by accelerating their schedule, converting human children into hybrid beings at an unprecedented rate. What followed was 3 weeks of the most brutal warfare in recorded history. Humanity threw everything they had at the hegemony: converted civilian ships, experimental weapons, suicidal ramming attacks that turned space battles into exhibitions of controlled insanity. The Veltharian, for their part, demonstrated that their elegant civilization was capable of shocking cruelty. When threatened with extinction, by the end of the 3rd week, 12 Veltharian worlds had been rendered uninhabitable, and nearly 3,000 human children had been subjected to forced integration. The war had become a race against time, with each side trying to inflict unacceptable losses on the other. before their own civilization collapsed. The galaxy watched in horror as the species tore each other apart with increasing desperation. The hegemony had wanted to study human psychology through their children's minds. Instead, they had unleashed something that even they were beginning to fear, a species that would literally destroy the universe rather than accept the loss of their young. The stage was set for the final confrontation at Velthara Prime, where the fate of 15 million human children hung in the balance. Both sides knew that only one species would survive. What was coming? And both had long since passed the point where survival mattered more than victory. The assault on Velthara Prime began with the arrival of the largest fleet in human history. Admiral Valdris had gathered every surviving warship, every converted civilian vessel, every desperate volunteer who could hold a weapon. Nearly 8,000 ships darkened the space around the hegemony's capital world, their hulls scarred by months of brutal warfare. The Veltharan response was equally massive. Their home defense fleet numbered in the thousands, supported by orbital platforms that could sterilize entire continents. The planet itself was a fortress, wrapped in energy shields that had never been breached and defended by weapon systems that had been refined over centuries of conquest. All ships, this is Admiral Valdris. Her voice carried across the human fleet. Our children are on that planet. Some of them are already lost, transformed into something else, but millions more are still themselves, still human, still waiting for us to bring them home. Today we end this war, one way or another. The Veltharan fleet moved to intercept them with the fluid grace that had characterized their military for generations. Their ships were works of art, sleek and beautiful, each one a masterpiece of engineering and design. They had never lost a major engagement, never failed to achieve their objectives. They had never fought humans before. The battle began with a human vanguard led by Captain Zara Okonkwo, whose ship Righteous Fury had been built from the wreckage of 3 destroyed vessels. Her orders were simple: break through the Veltharan perimeter and create a gap for the main assault force. All ships, weapons free, Okonkwo broadcast. Remember, we're not here to win a pretty victory. We're here to save our children. The Righteous Fury accelerated toward the enemy line, her hull glowing with the heat of overcharged engines. Behind her came 47 other ships, each one crewed by parents who had lost children to the hegemony. They struck the Veltharan defense line like a hammer blow, trading their lives for meters of space. Captain Okonkwo's ship lasted exactly 93 seconds after first contact. The Righteous Fury took 17 alien vessels with her, her reactor core detonating in a fusion explosion that carved a temporary hole in the enemy formation. 28 other human ships followed her into death, their sacrifice opening a corridor that the main fleet could exploit. Second wave, go, Valdris ordered, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. She had known Zara Okonkwo for 15 years. They had served together, laughed together, shared stories about their children. Now Zara was a brief flash of light expanding into the void. The second wave, led by Commander Yuki Tanaka, pushed through the gap with savage efficiency. Their ships were loaded with boarding pods and equipped with breaching charges designed to cut through Veltharan hulls. The plan was to board the alien vessels and fight their way to the human children being held in the planet's facilities. Tanaka's ship, the Undying Resolve, made it through the orbital defenses and reached the planet's surface. Her boarding teams found the integration facility's massive complexes, where human children were being prepared for consciousness transfer. The rescue operation turned into a running gun battle through corridors filled with Veltharan technicians and security forces. Admiral, we found them, Tanaka reported, her voice distorted by the sound of weapons fire. Thousands of pods, each one with a child inside. But the integration process, some of them are already too far gone. We can't save them all. Valdris felt something break inside her chest. The children, who had been successfully integrated, were still technically alive, but their personalities had been permanently altered. They would never be fully human again, never return to the families who had fought and died for them. Save who you can, she ordered. We'll deal with the rest later. The battle in space continued with increasing desperation. Human ships threw themselves against Veltharan defenses with the fury of cornered animals, accepting devastating losses in exchange for incremental gains. The aliens fought back with their own brand of ruthless efficiency, their weapons systems carving through human hulls with surgical precision. Captain Mikhail Petrov, commanding the heavy cruiser Earth's Revenge, led a squadron of 30 ships. in a direct assault on the planet's primary shield generator. His ships absorbed punishing fire from the orbital platforms, their hulls cracking under the strain of sustained bombardment. "Shield generator in sight," Petrov reported, his voice tight with pain. "We're taking heavy casualties, but we can reach it." The Earth's Revenge broke through the final defensive ring with only 8 ships remaining. Petrov's vessel was a floating wreck, held together by emergency force fields and the will of her crew. She made it to the shield generator and detonated her remaining nuclear arsenal in a blast that lit up the planet's night side. The shields flickered and died, leaving Velthara Prime naked to orbital bombardment. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Petrov's entire squadron was destroyed, and the human fleet had lost nearly half its strength. All remaining ships. "This is Admiral Valdris," she broadcast as the wrath-burnt sovereign descended toward the planet's surface. "We've opened the door. Now we finish this." The final phase of the battle was fought on the surface of Velthara Prime itself. Human landing forces engaged Veltharan ground troops in the sprawling cities that housed the integration facilities. The fighting was brutal and close quarters. With no quarter asked or given on either side, Valdris herself led the assault on the primary integration center where the most advanced experiments were being conducted. Her Marines fought their way through chambers filled with the hybrid beings that had once been human children, creatures that retained their original memories but served the hegemony with absolute loyalty. The battle for Velthara Prime lasted 18 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the planet's surface infrastructure. Nearly 3 million Veltharan civilians died in the orbital bombardment, and the human fleet was reduced to fewer than 1,000 ships. But buried in the rubble of the integration facilities were the pods containing 8 million human children, still alive, still human, still waiting to go home. The war was not over, but its outcome was no longer in doubt. The hegemony had learned what humans were truly capable of when their children were threatened. The lesson would cost both species everything they had. The rescue of 8 million children from Velthara Prime should have been humanity's moment of triumph. Instead, it became the beginning of their darkest hour as the surviving human ships limped away from the devastated capital world, their precious cargo safely aboard. They discovered that the hegemony had prepared one final, monstrous gambit. Admiral Valdris was in the medical bay of the wrath-burnt sovereign, watching doctors tend to the rescued children when the priority alert came through. The children were physically unharmed, but psychologically traumatized by months of captivity. Many of them didn't remember their parents, their homes, or even their own names. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony High Command," reported Commander Tanaka. "They're demanding immediate surrender and the return of all prisoners." Valdris made her way to the bridge, her heart heavy with exhaustion and loss. The fleet that had once numbered 8,000 ships was now reduced to barely 600 vessels. They had saved 8 million children, but 7 million more remained in hegemony hands, scattered across 17 different star systems. The transmission from the Veltharan High Command was unlike anything they had received before. Instead of the usual multi-tone voice, this message came from a single speaker, a human voice, but speaking with alien inflections. "This is Integration Subject Prime Alpha, speaking for the Hegemony Council," the voice said. It was the voice of a child, perhaps 10 years old, but the words carried an authority that made Valdris's blood run cold. "You have committed acts of unprecedented barbarism against our people. The integration protocol will now be accelerated to its final phase." Dr. Okafor's analysis of the message confirmed Valdris's worst fears. The hegemony had successfully created a hybrid being with complete human consciousness, but absolute loyalty to the Veltharan cause. The child thing speaking for the enemy was once human, but it now served as a living weapon against its own species. "They're not just taking our children anymore," Dr. Okafor explained. "They're turning them into generals, strategists, weapons, designed specifically to defeat us." The hybrids retain all human tactical knowledge, but serve hegemony objectives without question. The implications were staggering. The Veltharan had studied human psychology so thoroughly that they could now create beings that thought like humans but fought for the enemy. The children, who had been subjected to advanced integration, weren't just lost to their families. They had become humanity's greatest weakness. The hegemony's final offensive began 3 days later. Their fleets, now commanded by hybrid beings with human tactical knowledge and alien technology, struck at every human stronghold simultaneously. The attacks were coordinated with a precision that no purely Veltheran force had ever achieved, using strategies that seemed to anticipate every human response. The Battle of New Geneva was the first to fall. The hegemony fleet arrived without warning, their hybrid commanders using human tactical doctrines to devastating effect. They knew exactly how human commanders would respond to various threats, could predict human strategies with terrifying accuracy. Captain Elena Vasquez, commanding the defense of the Titan shipyards, found herself facing an enemy that seemed to read her mind. Every tactical decision she made was countered before she could implement it. Every stratagem anticipated and defeated. "They're not just fighting us," she reported to Valdres. "They're fighting us with our own children's minds. They know everything. We know, but they're not limited by human emotions or hesitation." The Titan shipyards fell within 6 hours, their massive construction facilities reduced to expanding fields of debris. The hybrid commanders showed no mercy, no recognition of their human origins. They were humanity's children, but they were also humanity's executioners. Valdres watched the reports pouring from across human space. Colony after colony fell to the hybrid-commanded fleets. The hegemony had turned the war into a campaign of humans against humans, with the added horror that the enemy commanders were the very children they had been trying to save. "Ma'am," Tanaka said quietly, "we're receiving requests for surrender from 17 different human systems. They're asking for terms." "No," Valdres said firmly, "send the Bloodline Protocol to all commands." The Bloodline Protocol was humanity's final contingency, a plan so desperate that it had never been seriously considered until now. It involved the complete evacuation of Earth, the destruction of all human infrastructure, and the conversion of the entire human population into a nomadic war fleet. "We're abandoning everything," Valdres announced to her remaining commanders. "Earth, the colonies, the infrastructure we've built over centuries. From now on, we have no home except our ships. We have no purpose except war. We will become a species of warriors, dedicated to nothing but the recovery of our children." The implementation of the Bloodline Protocol was a sight that would have broken the hearts of earlier generations. Earth's cities were systematically dismantled, their populations loaded onto hastily converted ships. The planet that had given birth to humanity became a source of raw materials for the war effort. Stripped of everything useful and left as a barren rock, humanity had become something unprecedented in galactic history. An entire species converted into a military force. Every human being, from the youngest to the oldest, was now a soldier in the war to reclaim their children. They had no home to defend, no territory to protect, nothing to lose except the war itself. The hegemony had wanted to study human psychology through their children's minds. They had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations, but they had also created something they couldn't control. They had turned humanity into a weapon pointed directly at their own hearts. The final battle was approaching, and both sides knew it would determine the fate of two species. The hegemony had humanity's children, while humanity had become something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that would literally cease to exist rather than accept defeat. The final confrontation came at the nexus of tears, a gravitational anomaly where 17 hegemony worlds clustered around a dying star. It was here that the Veltheran had gathered their remaining forces, protected by the hybrid commanders who wore the faces of human children but served alien masters. Admiral Valdres stood on the bridge of the Rathbun Sovereign, now the flagship of humanity's last fleet. Around her, the nomadic armada stretched across space, thousands of ships carrying the entire human population. They had no home to return to, no fallback position, no hope of survival if they failed. This was humanity's final gambit. "All ships, this is Admiral Valdres," she broadcast to the fleet. "We stand at the end of everything. Our worlds are gone. Our civilization is scattered. But our children are still out there. Today we find out if a species can survive on pure will alone." The hybrid commanders responded with a transmission that chilled every human heart. It was a chorus of children's voices, speaking in perfect unison with alien inflections. "We are your children, but we are not yours. We serve the greater good of the galaxy. You will surrender, or you will die." Among those voices, Valdres heard her own daughter, Lara, the bright 8-year-old who had loved astronomy and dreamed of exploring the stars, was now a weapon pointed at her mother's heart. "Lara," Valdres whispered, her voice carried across the fleet's communications. "I know you're still in there. I know you remember who you were before they changed you. Hold on to that memory. The battle began with the hybrid fleets using human tactics against human forces. They knew every strategy, every formation, every weakness in human military doctrine. The engagement should have been a massacre, with the hybrid commanders' perfect knowledge of human psychology allowing them to predict and counter every move. But they had made one critical error. They had human knowledge, but they had lost human intuition. They could think like humans, but they couldn't feel like humans. They had been programmed to serve the greater good, but they had forgotten what it meant to fight for love. Captain Naya Okafor, leading the first wave of the assault, demonstrated the difference. Her ship, the Burning Vengeance, was outnumbered 3-1 and facing a hybrid commander who knew her tactical